Thanks for downloading The Inquiry. We're going behind the scenes of one of the world's most controversial organisations, which intriguingly claims to exist everywhere. It's been reported in the last few days that WikiLeaks, the website that publishes classified information, has interesting material on the three main candidates in France's upcoming presidential election. A Russian newspaper headline says Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, is going to pour oil on the fire of the presidential campaign. Oh, we thought, this? Again? WikiLeaks caused a big shock last year when it leaked thousands of emails from inside Hillary Clinton's party during the US election. Emails the US intelligence services say were hacked by Russians trying to interfere in the campaign. It's led some to question who WikiLeaks is really working for. "You are no media organisation," a Democrat campaign spokesman said in an angry tweet to WikiLeaks. "You're a propaganda arm of the Russian government, running interference for their pet candidate, Trump." This is The Inquiry, and I'm Ruth Alexander. This week we're asking, can you believe what you read on WikiLeaks?
Part 1. A Big Idea.
Our first expert witness is Soulette Dreyfus. She was part of an online community in Melbourne, Australia in the early 1990s, before most of us had discovered the internet.
Networks were so limited, speeds were so slow, but it was a fantastic opportunity, a real sort of sense of frontier and excitement.
That's where she first met the man who would become a trusted friend and who would go on to found WikiLeaks, Julian Assange.
He, like other people in that community, was quite wry, fairly anti-establishment. But he, I would say, more than many others, had a strong, innate sense of the importance of justice being done.
And he planned to act on that sense of justice.
We had had a conversation where he said he had thought a great deal about what could you do to most help the world if you had only a little bit of money? And I think that WikiLeaks came out of that thought process.
Julian Assange set up the WikiLeaks website in 2006. The wiki part describes the fact that it was intended to be a website where anyone could edit the content to prove or disprove its accuracy. That idea didn't work out as Julian Assange hoped, and so he set up a small team of volunteers to do the fact-checking. The leaks part describes the website's main function. It invites whistleblowers to send in confidential documents, which it will then publish. That idea worked spectacularly. They published the operating procedures of Guantanamo Bay, emails from US vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin's personal inbox, the membership list of a far-right party in the UK, a confidential report criticising waste dumping by Dutch oil traders, hundreds of private emails from leading climate scientists, we'll talk more about that later, and hundreds of thousands of pager messages sent by people caught up in the terror attacks of 9/11. And then, in 2010, they broke a story that really got Soulette Dreyfus's attention, and the world's.
I don't know if that's a Bushman Sullivan. Copy at White 6. That's a weapon. Yeah. Hotel 26, Radio 20.
WikiLeaks had been sent a classified video showing a US helicopter in Iraq attacking a group of people, which included journalists and children.
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over.
It called the video Collateral Murder.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire! Keep shooting.
Soulette Dreyfus went to see her friend Julian Assange give a talk at a screening of the video.
And it was packed to the rafters, and you couldn't even sit on the floor because there was no room anywhere. And yet, despite this incredible crowd, when he started to play, you literally could have heard a pin drop. I felt that he had achieved this summiting of Mount Everest that really good journalists aspire to do maybe just once or twice in their lives. That they could create a story that was not just of public impact, but public interest.
In just 4 years, WikiLeaks had gone from obscurity to breaking some of the biggest news stories in the world. But how reliable were those stories? How much fact-checking was WikiLeaks doing?
Part 2. The cat in the closet.
I was based in Germany, working from home and also from a closet at work that I kind of was hiding in from time to time in order to do something more useful than sitting at my desk.
Our second expert witness, Daniel Domscheit-Berg, was one of the first people to join the WikiLeaks team, a handful of people, all of them volunteers, based in different parts of the world, working together online. This was 2007. Whenever he could, Daniel Domscheit-Berg would slip away from his desk at his job in IT outsourcing and take his laptop to, yes, he did say it, a closet.
It was kind of a steel cage where old equipment was stored. It was in the attic.
It was all rather cloak and dagger. He even had a pseudonym for his WikiLeaks work.
Daniel Schmidt, my cat's name is Schmidt.
It was a name he used when he was digging into the documents that piled up in the WikiLeaks inbox. He would try to verify details they contained to establish whether the leaks were likely to be real or fake. A difficult job. Sometimes they went to great lengths, but...
Sometimes there was basically no fact-checking at all apart from a plausibility check.
A plausibility check, that's just kind of, does this feel right? Is this probably from...
Yeah, and also a lot about the economic cost. Who would profit from this being a doctored document? How likely is that? But it's a very shallow check for sure. If you get a 600-page US military document, for example, a field manual for covert ops or something like this, there's no real way to verify if on page 220 something has been altered.
There was also the problem of how to spot what you can't see, information that's missing. In 2009, the year before Collateral Murder, their big Iraq War video story we told you about in the last chapter, WikiLeaks published a bundle of shocking emails leaked from inside the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia in the UK, one of the world's leading authorities on global temperatures.
It appeared to be a collection of documents that would suggest the whole issue of climate change has been overrated a little bit, that maybe the climate is not as clearly changing because of human influence as some scientists are suggesting.
Climate skeptics like US Senator Jim Inhofe appeared on Fox News to claim they'd been right all along.
I talked about the scientists coming to me and saying, look, they're cooking this thing. They're withholding the raw data. Now, the real redemption is that everything I said back then, it appears that they're saying now in these hacked emails.
The emails called into question the integrity of climate science. It was a huge scoop for WikiLeaks. But then...
the researchers from the university said, sorry, but this is not the full story.
Investigators later agreed, concluding that the collection of emails was incomplete and taken out of context.
And that's one way how you can manipulate information and the perception of people in the public very easily.
The ClimateGate emails hadn't been fake, but they hadn't given the full picture either. Daniel Domscheit-Berg says the episode made clear that his small team was struggling under the weight of documents arriving at WikiLeaks.
We were constantly, for 3 years, we were discussing this problem because we were falling behind the curve. The curve ahead of us got bigger and bigger and the pile of documents got bigger and bigger.
Why didn't you just recruit more people?
Well, how do you recruit people for this? We couldn't just recruit people from a job marketing platform. So it was very hard to grow the team, to find people that would contribute, that you would trust.
While Daniel Domscheit-Berg worried about how to grow the organisation, the mood began to change within the original group.
At some stage in 2010, Julian decided that he would take all the decisions for himself, where he did not respect opinions in the team.
Julian Assange and Daniel Domscheit-Berg fell out.
Suddenly, Julian said, I have 100 new horses in the stable. Why should I bother with you guys? And that's it. It was 100 new people, fanboys and fangirls from all over the place. Young people, idealistic people. But how could he know that these are people he could work with?
Our expert witness left WikiLeaks in frustration. And yet WikiLeaks boasts of a perfect decade-long record of accuracy. Despite Daniel Domscheit-Berg's fractious relationship with Julian Assange and his reservations about the fact-checking process he witnessed at WikiLeaks, he agrees it has made very few mistakes.
Perfect is a very big word. I think it has a very good record. It's not perfect, but then no one's record is perfect.
In 10 years of releasing secret material, WikiLeaks, as far as we can tell, has published no fakes. But it's also true, as Daniel Domscheit-Berg has made clear, that almost all power at WikiLeaks lies with its founder, Julian Assange. So if we want to know whether you can believe what you read on WikiLeaks, perhaps we should find out more about him. You're listening to The Inquiry with me, Ruth Alexander. Our next expert witness told us he subscribes to our podcast. You could too. Just search for The Inquiry Podcast.
Part 3. Julian.
I met Assange in a Turkish restaurant on a Saturday night.
Our third expert witness, James Ball, worked for the Bureau of Investigative Journalism when he met WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in 2010. James Ball and his boss knew Assange had something they hoped he might share.
I was sort of dragged along as the kind of 24-year-old nerd in glasses who he might relate to. And essentially it worked.
Dinner was followed by drinks and jackpot.
Within an hour we had 400,000 classified US documents on a USB stick.
James Ball couldn't believe his luck.
I was absolutely shocked. That's quite a big thing. I mean, this was sensitive stuff.
Over the next few months, working closely with Julian Assange, James Ball and his colleagues pored over those documents, US battlefield reports from Iraq. It was a massive story for a young journalist to work on. And when Julian Assange dangled the next big scoop he was planning, James Ball jumped at the chance to join WikiLeaks to work on it full-time. He found himself among a young team.
About 8 people tops, and most of them had only been there a month or two.
With little or no experience of serious investigative journalism, but doing exactly that.
It was chaotic. I mean, we were working out of this guy's front room in the middle of Norfolk.
What they were working on was astonishing. They'd been given 250,000 secret messages sent by US diplomats. James Ball and his new colleagues were under pressure.
There were rumours that we had them, so we didn't have long. And so you would turn on the TV, it would be talking about what you were doing.
We think that they may have 260,000 State Department diplomatic cables.
It's time that the Obama administration treats WikiLeaks for what it is, a terrorist organization whose continued operations threatens our security. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down, Attorney General Holder.
No one knew where we were at this point, so everyone was speculating about where you holed up. People on TV were calling for you to be shut down or to be killed.
We got special ops forces. I mean, a dead man can't leak stuff. Illegally shoot the son of a...
What was the atmosphere like in the room?
It's quite electrifying. It's not often that you realise that half the world is actually talking about what you're doing.
And Julian Assange was at the centre of this?
Absolutely at the centre of it. People drift in and out, and Julian is the constant, and really the only person ever who's made the decisions.
Julian Assange was by now a well-known and controversial figure, and not only for his work on WikiLeaks. He'd been accused of rape and sexual assault in Sweden, arrested and bailed. He's consistently denied the allegations, which he says are a ruse to extradite him to the United States. In this highly charged atmosphere, working on a story the whole world seemed to be waiting for, James Ball began to observe his new boss more closely.
Editors I've worked with everywhere else, as you get to know them, you might just quietly go, I wonder if we could do this differently, or is that a good idea? Maybe we should do this instead.
You challenge them?
Yeah, and not disrespectfully, but you challenge. And he didn't want that. He wanted his will to be done.
What happens if you did challenge him?
You would get quite aggressively shouted down. The meeting would move on, but you would be out of favour for hours or for a day or two, passed over when he was chatting to everyone, was quite cold.
Eventually, James Ball fell out of favour completely. He no longer works for WikiLeaks. According to our expert witness then, Julian Assange can be a difficult, complex man. His personal circumstances remain complex too. He's never been to Sweden to be questioned over the sex allegations. Instead, he sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been holed up for over 4 years. But what are his political beliefs? That's perhaps a fairer or more relevant question. What drives Julian Assange?
So he would say it's transparency. He would say he's libertarian and all power should be accountable.
But James Ball thinks one of Julian Assange's overriding motivations is simply to make a splash.
You know, he's stuck in the back bedroom of a second-floor flat in the Ecuadorian embassy. What would eat away at his mental image is this sense that he's kind of lost his yesterday's man. So this sense that you're still a big player on the world stage despite it is quite a reinforcing internal narrative, isn't it?
That's just James Ball's opinion, of course. Julian Assange has other critics who've made more serious allegations. They say that WikiLeaks stories target Democrats in the US, not Republicans. The US and the West, not Russia. Could Julian Assange be selecting his targets for political reasons? James Ball doesn't think so.
I think Assange will publish what he gets. I think it's in his blood.
That begs perhaps the most important question of all. If Julian Assange will publish whatever he gets, where is he getting his information from?
Part 4. The Secret Source.
Our final expert witness describes himself as
somewhat obsessive, so I get an idea and I can't let it go.
Chris Zappone is a foreign news editor at The Age newspaper in Melbourne. An American in Australia, he watched in fascination as the recent US election campaign unfolded.
As far back as 2015, there was talk that WikiLeaks had some sort of dirt on Hillary Clinton that was going to make it really hard for her in the campaign. As we got into the election year, sure enough, there were outfits that sort of appeared out of nowhere that had access to emails and to documents from the Democratic Party or people that were related to the Democratic Party. And as into this world that Assange started to release thousands of emails.
The contents of the emails weren't all that revelatory, he says. The bigger story was the timing.
The streams of embarrassing materials that is being produced right in time for the election. So it looks like there's a tactic to it.
The US intelligence services investigated the Democratic National Committee, or DNC, leaks. Their conclusion?
Based on uniform intelligence assessments, the Russians were responsible for hacking the DNC.
The leaks had
all the forensic fingerprints of Russian hackers.
The US authorities believe Russia was trying to influence the American election through WikiLeaks.
It has made me conclude that WikiLeaks is essentially, I don't know if this is the intention, but it functions as an anti-state and particularly anti-Western state organization.
Unlike our last expert witness, Chris Zappone doesn't rule out the possibility that Julian Assange is sympathetic to America's old foe, Russia.
He's had a show on RT, so the Russian-sponsored foreign language media network. He's boasted of having a role in helping the former NSA contractor Edward Snowden find his way to Russia and counseling Snowden to go to Russia.
Julian Assange strongly denies the Russian state gave him the material. He told Fox News, "Our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party." If you pay close attention to what Julian Assange says, though, it leaves open the possibility his source was Russian, just not the Russian state. And Chris Zappone believes the leak, with its timing and its target, does have all the hallmarks of a Russian-orchestrated campaign.
One of the strategies in Russian information warfare is that you hit the public from many different angles with similar messages. So rather than the old day of Pravda, issuing the statement, this is officially what the Russian government believes, instead of that, what you have is multiple channels saying the same thing.
He could imagine Russia feeding material to numerous small websites that carry the first few emails, so the story begins to gather pace, and then
WikiLeaks kicks in. This information is recycled and picked up. That gives it more legitimacy to be picked up by media in the West. And then the next thing you know, you've got 200 stories live online around the world echoing or repeating the same thing. And that literally changes the reality that we live in.
And to Russia, he says, WikiLeaks might look like the perfect vehicle.
One theme of Russian propaganda is that they will promote any storyline that makes you question the credibility and the authority of Western governments and institutions. And in this way, WikiLeaks has really fit the bill.
We've spent some time exploring the inner workings of WikiLeaks and what the motivations of the man behind it, Julian Assange, might be. But maybe this story isn't actually about what goes on inside the whistleblowing website.
It's very possible that everything we've seen in the past year from WikiLeaks, it's not really about Assange at all, and it's not really about WikiLeaks being a revolutionary force for transparency at all.
Maybe it's about the agenda of those who feed material to WikiLeaks. The website exists, in its words, to open governments, to reveal classified information, uncomfortable national secrets, and corruption. Many journalists would support those aims. But if you commit to publishing the leaks you're sent, you make yourself vulnerable. Vulnerable to being used by states hoping to weaken rivals by hacking sensitive information and dropping it in your lab. That could be Russia. It could be anyone. So can you believe what you read on WikiLeaks? Yes, probably. But you can't be sure who wanted you to read it, or why. This podcast was presented by me, Ruth Alexander, produced by Kate Lamble and Phoebe Keane, and mixed by James Beard. The editor is Richard Knight. Next week we're asking, how should US journalists handle President Trump? We've got more than 100 other episodes ready to download as podcasts too, and we like to hear your ideas. Tweet us at BBC The Inquiry. Another podcast you might like is Crowd Science, also from the BBC World Service. It answers science questions raised by you, the listener, like, what is the real time? Sounds simple, but oh, it is not.